Today I'm going to be showing you how I feed my 4-month-old baby axolotls and what goes into the care and keeping of the little guys, as well as what kind of food I feed, how often I feed, and how I do it. So first things first, baby axolotls have a huge appetite, and it's super important that they get fed at least every day. For some of your axolotls that don't have the biggest appetite, you might want to feed more than once a day. But once they get to about this size, this girl is about 4 inches long, you're good with just feeding once a day. She has a great appetite at this age, and you don't really have to worry about them getting hungry. The other thing with feeding every day is you want to make sure they all get enough of food, because if you have more than one in a container, they can kind of fight for their food. Or one will eat all of it, the other one will get left with nothing. So you want to make sure that they all get food. This is the setup I have. I've got 2 containers for 4 little axolotls. I have the 2 littler guys in one, and the 2 bigger ones in another one. This helps that the little guys don't have quite as big of an appetite, so that way that they can be with their food for a longer amount of time, and that the bigger guys won't eat at all. The other reason why I have them like this is at this age, once they get their back feet, they can start going into cannibalism. The thing about axolotls is that they will eat anything that moves. So if there are other little friends swimming by them and they see their little feet, they might want to eat that little foot. So I have them separated so that's less likely to happen. They have pretty big Sterlite containers. These ones are 15-liter containers. So I feed my baby axolotls bloodworms and brine shrimp. The younger they are, they like the brine shrimp. The brine shrimp is usually a little bit smaller. As they get older, they prefer the bloodworms. Bloodworms are higher in protein, and axolotls thrive off of protein. So weaning them off of brine shrimp and going toward bloodworms is what you really want to do. As they get bigger, you're going to be able to feed them just bloodworms, and that's it, until they get to the size where they can eat red wigglers and earthworms and live worms. Once they can eat just 1 or 2 live big worms, it's a lot easier because you're not going to be dealing with the mess of bloodworms and brine shrimp. Because as you can see, there's so many little worms inside one little frozen cube. So when you put it in the tank, those worms get everywhere and can really spike your ammonia in your tank if you're not careful. So these little cubes just get popped right out. Honestly, I don't have a preference with brand. The Omega-1, that is a 6.3 minimum protein count, so that's pretty good. And when you compare that to the brine shrimp you're looking at only about 4%, if that'll focus. So as far as protein count goes, bloodworms is really where it's at. But at this age now, my little guys, they get both. They get half and half. Alright, so let me open this up and I'll show you what I do. Alright, so my little guys, I give each one of those containers 1 cube of bloodworms and 1 cube of brine shrimp. I put it in little baby food containers. That's just a lot easier to transport to and from the tank. That way I don't accidentally leave this frozen food in my office, because the last thing I want is going to have to go buy a brand new thing of food. These usually cost around anywhere from $5 to $7 depending on where you get them. They last a long time, so when the babies are in their baby stage eating bloodworms and brine shrimp, it's relatively cheap to feed them compared to buying earthworms, which are about $4 for 12. So these little containers here, I'm going to show you what I do and then what I recommend you do when you have your axolotl in your tank. It's a little different because in the tank you're dealing with water parameters and things like that, where in my little tubs, I change their water every single day, so I don't have to really worry about rising ammonia concentrations. So when your axolotls are in your tank, I put a little extra water in that one, hold on okay, overfilled that a little bit. But when the axolotls are in your tank, I recommend that you thaw out the food beforehand. You just put some water in there, swish it around for a while until it's all thawed out. That way they're not eating, any like frozen chunks of bloodworms or anything like that. That can really clog their system. Also, the reason why you want to thaw it out before you put it in your tank is because the frozen bloodworms and brine shrimp float. So if you let it thaw in your tank, that's going to get bloodworms and brine shrimp everywhere. But if you thaw it out beforehand, you can turkey baste the food where exactly you want it to be. That way it's a lot easier to clean up after the fact. Because as far as feeding when they're in the tank, it's the main thing you want to watch out for is leaving extra food in the tank, because that'll just spike your ammonia levels and you have to do tank cleanings a lot more often, and it can just be a whole mess. So I'll let this thaw out for a little bit and I will show you what it's like to feed them. Alright, so while we wait for that food to thaw, I'll show you what I do. This is my cup with the still frozen. This has no water in it. I literally just dump it right in, and they thaw while it's in the water. The axolotls usually don't go after the food when it's still in a cube, just because it has no movement. I let that thaw in the water. The brine shrimp usually thaws pretty quick, but I just let that thaw for a few minutes, and then I'll come back and turkey baste that around. That way they can all get their own fair share. Alright, so I'll move on to these guys over here, and I will show you partially thawed. It's not all the way done yet, but you can still, there's brine shrimp on the bottom there that's ready to go. So basically what you do is you always want a turkey baster. This way you're not just dumping the food all over in the tank. The turkey baster helps keep it a little bit more clean. Just turkey baste up however much you want to give. And you can go, oh, she kind of got scared. Right in front of them, and they usually, there she goes, will eat a bunch. As you can see, even just in the tub, that tactic gets food all over the place. While they're in a tank setting, that food will build up more and more and just create a whole bunch of ammonia, and you'll have to do water changes. Something that other people have tried is, this is a flower pot base, and you can put this in their tank on the bottom. And then whenever you feed them, if you feed them on top of that flower pot, let me get some food here. Most of the time the frozen food will just float down to the bottom and just stay there. So as you can see, if you feed on the flower pot, all the food stays in one spot. The bloodworms especially are a little bit more dense, and the axolotls, if you feed in one spot, will learn to go into that particular spot for feeding. These guys don't. I haven't been working on them with that. They just know the turkey baster gives them food. So that's one option you can do, and if you leave it there for about 20 minutes, they should come over and start eating their food, and they'll learn to meet you at the little dish once you put the turkey baster in the water. The other option you can do as well is, if you have a small little container like this, you can separate them for feeding. And what you do is just put some water in here. Always water with water conditioner. Never put them in unconditioned water. This is what I use, just top thin water conditioner. That takes out all of the chlorine and chemicals in the water that can be really harmful. I keep a bucket of dechlorinated water. That's a little bit of black sand down at the bottom. I keep this here all the time just because I use it so often. So just get a little bit of water here. And grab a net. I use this. It's really easy to catch these guys when they're in a tub like this, so I just need the little net. If you're putting your little guy in a 10 or 20 gallon tank, there's a lot more room for them to run and hide, so you might need a bigger net like this one. I don't need that. That's a pretty big net. But I will show you with Puff here. She's very hungry all the time. She's a great eater. Scoop them up, nice and unstressful. As long as the water is conditioned, they're perfectly fine in there for a short amount of time. As they get bigger, it gets more stressful. But also as they get bigger, they eat live worms, so feeding is easier. And you can just put some food in there for them. And she's going crazy already. Puff is my most aggressive eater. As you can see, she has a mouthful of food. She's also the biggest, which is most likely the reason why she's the biggest is because she's so aggressive. And then there's little Rhaegal in here who sees her eating and he wants food too. And I'm going to feed him in a little bit, but he has food in his thing already. Yeah, so you can just leave them in there for a while. The thing with baby axolotls is they only eat moving food. So most of the time you have to drop it right in front of their face. They're kind of the dum-dums of the fish world. And she will eat some after she digests the mouthful of food you just ate. So you just kind of have to sit there with them, playing with it, feeding them a little bit at a time, and make sure that they get enough food. She, on her own, will eat an entire cube of bloodworms. She still has some in her mouth. And these little guys, most of them will also eat a cube of food on their own, too. So you just want to make sure that they get enough food. Those are the two ways of feeding when you have them in a tank. Those are the best ways to limit the amount of extra food that gets floating around. This is probably the cleanest method of separating them, but you do not want to do this for too long of amount of time. So once they get to about the 6-month age, you probably don't want to separate them anymore just because it's so stressful. And of course, my way of feeding, that little guy's already down there eating some of the brine shrimp. He's eating it when it's not moving. They kind of fix that themselves. They'll start eating food that's not moving as they get older. And then little Tyrians want some food. But yeah, so that's how I feed. This is my feeding station. I'll kind of show you what I keep here. Obviously, water conditioner and my fish net and turkey baster, those are absolute necessities. I also keep paper towels here, just because it does splash and get all over the place. And when I dump these containers each night, I wipe them out with a paper towel just to keep it clean. And then these are brine shrimp eggs. I don't use them anymore just because my little guys have already outgrown baby brine shrimp. But this is the eggs, and that's a hatchery, that green thing. So when they're really, really little, they only eat live brine shrimp, so you have to hatch them yourself. And I ordered this through Amazon. Honestly, that's kind of the best way to go. That's 50 grams of brine shrimp. And that was about $15. Most local stores sell about 9 grams of brine shrimp eggs for like $10, so getting it online is the best bet. Yeah, so this is my method of feeding. This is what I would recommend. If you have any questions, let me know. But that's the way to do it.